Welcome back. This time of year, we sit down with some of the big political newsmakers here under the dome, and among them, Assembly Speaker Robin Vos. He's the powerful head of the state assembly with a significant amount of control over Wisconsin policy. That includes a deal struck between Republicans in the legislature and leaders with the universities of Wisconsin, trading positions in diversity, equity, and inclusion for much-needed funding. And we start our conversation there. So when we speak to Democrats, who we have obviously, one of course coming before here, they say that this is just essentially a headline. It's not really a win for you. I was wondering if you were still taking victory laps for this deal.
Well, what's ironic is if it was just headlines, you would think they would have said, go ahead and pass it because it won't make any difference. But man, the amount of effort they put in to try to kill this deal. Don't forget, they tried an online petition. They tried to have Governor Evers himself lobby the regents to try to kill the deal. I can't imagine Governor Doyle, Governor Walker, Governor McCallum, Governor Thompson having their own Board of Regents reject what they wanted. So I think it was a good deal for both sides. Look, I think that DEI, which really stands for division, exclusion, and indoctrination, is something that we should all reject. Now, diversity is something we should all fight for. I want to have the best, the smartest, the most capable people applying for any job or any position in the university. But somehow it's become where if you're not the right race, you don't have the right ideology, or you don't say the right things with your pronouns, you're not allowed to participate in the same way that everybody else is. I think those are the kind of things where if they didn't think it was a big deal before, then they wouldn't have fought as hard as they did. So I think it was a big win. It was a compromise. I didn't get everything that I wanted, but that's the way politics is.
All right, and I understand that you want to take it a little bit further, switch it throughout state government. Do you have any specifics that you can offer?
Well, here's an example. I want to do a complete audit of how we do DEI and diversity throughout state government. So, look, we are so desperate for people to work in corrections. I bet if anybody walks off the street, it doesn't matter what their race or their gender is. As long as they're qualified, they take them. That's how all state government should be. Now, does that mean that if somebody walks in and they are Hispanic or Asian, woman, man, gay, straight, doesn't really matter. As long as they're the best qualified, I want to make sure that's what we use as our criteria. That's what I hope is being done across state government. But if we've gone back to this old outdated model where your race is more important than your skills, or you have to sign some kind of a DEI oath to be able to apply or work in an agency, those should be rejected. So first thing to do is to gather information. That's what we're going to do over 2024, do a complete audit, find all that information out, make sure we're not doing anything that's discriminatory or discouraging good people from applying, and then have the proposal come forward if there's a need be in January of 2025, and make sure that we're doing things right.
So also tied to that deal was that professorship based on kind of conservative economic values. We've heard concerns from conservative students throughout some of the surveys that they've done that their voices are not necessarily being valued as much. When we talk about this idea of indoctrination, isn't that having a conservative professorship kind of enshrining certain ideals kind of going the other way? Is that not indoctrination?
Because here's the way I look at it. Look, the university this week announced that they were going to do scholarships based on if you were a member of a federally recognized Indian tribe. Look, they tell me it's funded by a private donor. So if there's a donor that wants to give $1 million or whatever it is to be able to help Native American students, I might not agree with that, but it's private money and they should have every right to do it on the university campus. I would say the same thing for this conservative professorship. Here we have an institution that's going to go out and raise the money to make sure that we have more than one way of thinking on campus so students actually can see somebody that maybe they agree with, not always somebody who is in the opposite of philosophical world. But it's going to be funded by private sources. Now, if one was funded by taxpayer dollars, I would have an objection to that. I don't think it's right that we should do that, just like I don't think it's right that we should fund those scholarships with taxpayer dollars that are based on race. But the difference is every political science professor, save one or two, is liberal. And we don't have any kind of a litmus test to say you can't be here if you're liberal. But it sure seems like they have a litmus test to say that if they don't agree with them or have the right DEI statement, they're not even allowed to be part of the campus culture. Well, that's got to be fixed. So I want to have, again, the best and brightest teach. I don't care what your philosophy is, from communist to libertarian, right? But you got to be good at what you do, and you also have to be open to other people's ideas. We saw in that survey that far too many conservative students feel like if they don't fill out the survey or the test the way the professor wants, they're not going to get the grade that they deserve. Well, when I was in college, you could write whatever you wanted to, and as long as it was well done, you got an A. That's what I hope we would go back to, not if I don't write it exactly how the professor's worldview is, I fail. So I hope that an awful lot of those things will be rethought in how the university goes through this analysis of their DEI and focuses on saying we want to be a place where everybody can learn and not everybody has to learn only one thing.
Is there a difference, though, when it's the university itself taking on those scholarships, for example? That's an idea coming from their own volition instead of something coming from the state legislature being imposed on these universities?
No, I mean, it's all an idea that any good idea is one that everybody should embrace. I mean, the university should have been doing it themselves. They shouldn't have had to have any kind of a discussion with us. And again, they agreed to voluntarily do it as part of our bigger package. That's negotiations. We gave up some things that I didn't necessarily love. They gave up some things they didn't necessarily love. That's the art of compromise.
I want to turn to impeachment now. We have essentially two impeachments that we're watching out for Meagan Wolfe and Supreme Court Justice Janet Protasiewicz. From your perspective, obviously you've had these conversations within your own caucus. What's the status of those?
Well, first of all, let's start out by saying that I wish that there was a better option to run our elections than Meagan Wolfe, right? I mean, there are almost 6 million people in Wisconsin. I am positive there are people who are just as good, if not better, than the job that she has done. So I think for the good of the state, it'd be better if somebody else ran our elections. But I will say that biggest issues that people saw in 2020, I think in some ways we've addressed those. Number one, ballot drop boxes. The Supreme Court already said they're not allowed. Those hopefully won't be utilized going forward because they'd be illegal. Number two, we know that the concept of having outside contractors with outside money working inside the clerk's office, we have a constitutional amendment going on the ballot in in April, to make sure that Zuckerbucks and those kind of things don't happen going forward. We have a bill working its way through the legislature on Monday process, where ballots will be able to be processed on Monday in the light of day and then put in the machine on Tuesday, so that by the time we go to bed, everybody knows who won an election. There's no midnight ballot dumps. So I feel like we have already made pretty good progress on a lot of things that people have concerns about, which is why in 2022, we had an election where John Leiber won state treasurer as a Republican, Josh Kaul won the attorney general. Tony Evers got elected governor again, and so did Ron Johnson as our U.S. senator. So most people look at 2022 and don't say it was some kind of a conspiracy or there were problems with it, because we put a lot of these new practices into place. So I want to focus on the future. Like I say, do I think it'd be better if Meagan Wolfe wasn't there? I do. But when you introduce a resolution and you only get 5 names on it out of 99, that's not a majority of a committee. That's not a majority of Republicans. It's not a majority of the legislature. So I imagine it's not going to go forward unless something changes, because the goodwill that has to happen is by getting the people in the chamber to agree on something, and it's nowhere near that consensus.
Got it. So it seems like what you're saying is that it's dead for right now?
I mean, unless the body changes, there's nowhere near the support. So I imagine that it will go by the wayside as we move forward and focus on the 2024 elections to make sure it's more like 2022 than it was like 2020.